Hello and welcome. There is always something magnetic about authority and power. When we are young, we chase it in different forms, be it influence, reputation, success, money, validation. We tell ourselves that we want impact. We tell ourselves we want to change the world. But beneath that ambition is a quieter, more dangerous question. What happens when you actually get power? Today's conversation is not just about journalism, it's not just about literature, and it is not just about controversies. It is about ambition, truth, ego, and it is about consequence. Our guest today is Tarun Tejpal, the renowned writer and one of the finest writers of our times. A man who has stood at the center of power, who has built institutions, challenged governments, wrote about desire and darkness, and experienced influence and public fall from grace. He founded one of India's first and highly disruptive investigative platforms. He's authored books like The Alchemy of Desire, a novel that explores obsession, love, and the fragile architecture of human morality. But this conversation is not just about headlines, it is about something more personal and relevant to young people of our times. What does success do to character? Where is the line between confidence and arrogance? How do we hold ambition without letting it consume us? And if we fail, how do we rebuild? Because if you aspire to lead, whether it's in media, business, startups, culture, you must understand one fundamental truth: power does not change you, it reveals you. With that, let's welcome Mr. Tarun Tejpal and let's begin our conversation. Welcome, Tarun.
Thank you, Nalin. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much for joining. You have lived multiple lives as a journalist, as a startup founder, a novelist. When did you realize that storytelling is what would define you?
I think that's the kind of impulse that generally comes very early in life for most people who end up in either the articulate arts or the inarticulate arts, because that's a very primal impulse shaped by, both nurture as well as nature. And so I suppose I must have been 10 or 11 years old when I was pretty clear that my primary obsession was the art of writing, along with sports, which was my lived obsession. And so, in unwittingly, I think I began to train myself for writing from the age of 10 or 11. I always read comprehensively, copiously, very widely. I read about writers, I read about writing, and it was always kind of a dominant thing. And like in any other vocation, the need to write then also is tied into what creates writing, and that's an inner life. So you cultivate an inner life and an analytical life and an observant and curious life, because those are the well springs from which writing will emerge. So both those things happen together at a very early stage. So by the time I reached college at the age of 15 or 16, I was fairly clear that I wished to be a writer. The problem in the late 70s, early 80s was there was no vocation called writing on the Indian landscape. You could not be something called a full time writer, which you could be in the West.
Yeah.
So there was only one vestibule into the business of most serious and sustained writing, and that was journalism. And so while I was still an undergraduate, I began to write for the national newspapers, including Indian Express and so on. So by the time I actually took my graduation papers, I was ready to start working and start in journalism, because
Yeah.
that was the obvious way into more serious writing.
It's interesting because most of us don't get clarity of what is our calling till much later in life. But as 20-year-olds, we have all these ideas of what success means to us. Uh, was there something that you got wrong about what success is as a 20-year-old?
Not really. In fact, if anything, I think I was both enabled and handicapped by, as what I called earlier, the inner life. Because writing is so dependent on, serious writing is so dependent on an inner life. And the inner life has its own very strong calibrations. One of the things the inner life does is it also is an observer of itself. So it's also constantly observing and analyzing the actions of the body it inhabits. Yeah. So for me, it was both things altogether. I think I would have been differently ambitious if I were not a writer. Say I had done an MBA or gone to an engineering college, or decided to become a doctor. I think the quality of my ambition would have been very different. It may not have been policed so rigorously on a day-to-day basis by my inner life. But the very act of writing is an act of querying, of questioning, of observing, of analyzing, which includes yourself in it. So yes, I was very ambitious as a writer, but not ambitious as in a conventional way. I was not ambitious to acquire a big car. I was not ambitious to acquire a big house. I was certainly not ambitious to acquire any titles. And if anything, I was vehemently opposed to the idea of hierarchies and the idea of titles. And some of that came from my own pathologies, which arose from the fact that I was an army officer's son, and I was deeply dismayed by the stringently hierarchical character of the Indian Army, where merit counted for very little, where seniority counted for everything. So these where the uniform was of tremendous importance. So my first thing was I will not work in any vocation in my life that asks two things of me. The first is wear a uniform. The second is say sir to anyone who's senior to you. So I mean, I said I need to respect people who earned my respect. I need to be able to wear and lead a lifestyle that my inner self dictates, not that is prescribed by an institution. So these all became unwittingly factors in my own choice of my career in life. And journalism seemed to offer all these things. Also, there was something very exciting about journalism in the late 70s, 80s. It was the first years in which journalism in India found its voice. And the reason it found its voice was because we had just lived through the emergency. Mrs. Gandhi had imposed the emergency in 1975 June, and it had been lifted in 1977. And even though we were cocooned by the cantonments of the Indian Army, one was still aware of the larger, and I was very young then, I was 11 or 12 years old, but one was aware that there was a great churn on outside the cantonments, that there were deep questions of freedom, democracy, independence, individuality, legal rights swirling all around. And journalists were beginning to respond to that. The Historically, we have to understand how journalism has evolved in India. For the first 25 years after independence, journalism carried the halo of the freedom struggle. In the freedom struggle, the best Indian journalists had walked hand in hand with the founding fathers who were fighting for independence. Post that, the glow remained, and Nehru was such an extraordinary figure, such an extraordinary statesman and leader, that journalists actually respected him for who he was at all times. So journalism retained a quality of being a handmaiden of those in power. But the emergency disrupted that illusion. It broke that illusion that journalism and power are on the same side of the fence. It made it clear that journalism's job is not to walk with power. Journalism's job is to stand across from power and question its actions, its deeds, and its misdeeds. Yeah. So I was part of that particular psychosis, and that sat very well with my own temperament and personality. So I came into journalism at a very exciting time when journalism was really a voice of the public, a voice of civil society.
So let's cut to the young people of today, uh, who largely feel invisible with social media, etc. How does one build a voice? A young person today, how do they build a voice in this perceived invisibility?
You see, I think the most important thing at all times for anyone building a voice, whether you're young, middle aged, or old like you and me, is to actually stand up for something you believe in. If you merely toe the line of the status quo, if you just become part of the stasis in society or the stasis of things, if you fail to find your voice to stand up for what we believe are the great central issues of modernity, which is injustice and justice, equality and inequality, you can never actually find your voice. You have to find your voice by standing up for what means something in this world or ought to mean something in this world, and be a bit unafraid while doing so. If you are an imitator, if you are just a follower, you cannot stand out. Any true innovator actually is not looking for precedent. He's looking to actually break precedent, you
True.
know. Yeah.
Identity is, built. It is not discovered by chance or something like that.
Oh,
So,
absolutely.
you have, while you spoke of the 70s and 80s and your time, right, your early writing life in Indian Express, etc., you also adopted digital fairly quickly. What drove you into, the
Actually, that's very interesting, Nalin, that you ask me. The problem pre the age of the digital and of venture funding largely meant that no matter what vocation you pursued, say you were a doctor or an engineer or a journalist, you fundamentally worked for some lala or the other. You worked for some rich, entrenched businessman, very often sitting on hereditary wealth, controlling companies. Actually, in the late 90s, it was there was for the first time in the history of India, there was a certain scenario unfolding thanks to the 1991 liberalization, thanks to fresh money coming into open markets, thanks to fresh money chasing talent, rather than talent chasing money all the time, that you had arrived at a place where if you had gifts, if you had experience, if you had a great idea, you could actually go and raise money for it and build something on your own. You could shift from being merely an employee to being an owner and an employer, right? And so when this was happening, I was the managing editor of Outlook at that time, which I had started along with Vinod Mehta and Deepak Shari in 1995, which was owned by Rajan Raheja, the Raheja's business house. And in 1999, for the first time, as the net began to explode and the web came into being, there suddenly appeared an opportunity that if you had a great idea, you could go and look for money. So we came up with this idea of starting an online serious journalism platform, which was India's first, to be honest, and going and finding some money to back it, some venture funding to back it. So we took this idea of the Helka, which was supposed to be a online platform that would practice hard journalism, not soft journalism, but hard adversarial journalism, which in my view always was the fundamental function of all journalism. So we went to Bombay with this idea with a two-page note. Uh, Curiously, we went to someone who then went on to become a very, very famous corporate house, Ashok Wadhwa of Ambit. We pitched this. There were three of us. We pitched this to him in his very fancy Nariman Point office. He loved the idea. He loved the name. He put a notional valuation to the company that was going to be made, and he agreed to say, I'll take 10% of it at this particular valuation, and that was enough funds for us to get started. Eventually, as it turned out, he didn't take it, but another venture capitalist took it at the same valuation. And so suddenly we had this little money to actually start Tehelka. And because I was the first serious journalist, senior journalist in India, moving into a totally new domain, new media, there was a lot of excitement around us. People kept asking us, why are you doing this? I hired a terrific group of journalists. And my answer was always the same. My answer was, uh, traditional journalism is largely now led by a commercial impulse. Tehelka's goal will be to be led by an editorial impulse, right? And we did that. We proved that. Tehelka became legendary in no time. We did broke story after
words,
story after story.
your words are so true even today about the commercial aspect of it. But in
It's
this
much worse now. It's much, much worse now, Nalin.
but in this age where young people talk a lot about mental health, investigative journalism always often challenges power. What is the psychological impact of that on people who are actually doing it?
So, I mean, it really has to be a matchup. I mean, all journalists are not the same. There are journalists who do kinds of work. The people who are combative, who insist on, say, exposing wrongdoing, exposing injustice, exposing corruption, exposing bigotry, that's a different kind of animal. It's a different, just like in a classroom, all 40 kids are different. Journalists are a different kind. So you have to have a few things. You have to have an exaggerated idea of your own place in the scheme of things, right? You have to have an exaggerated idea of your own ability to impact this scheme of things. So there's clearly some sort of hyperbole about yourself that you've got to live with, and you got to have a quality of combativeness and fearlessness to say, I can do this because it's the right thing to do and I'm going to do it. So it's not for everybody. You're absolutely right. But there are enough people. Actually, in my experience, the young are just fantastic. And I know you have to remember, Nalin, that all those legendary stories for which the Helka is famous and will remain famous forever because some of them were globally path-breaking stories. They were not done by me. They were done by young reporters. Every single story was done by a young reporter. What my job was only to make it possible.
So, just on that, for a young professional who learns to question authority, how do they do that without becoming cynical? Because they see so many things, right? How do you do that without personally getting cynical?
No, see, that's a very individual battle, Nalin. And like I said, it's a particular kind of journalist, a particular kind of young reporter who is outraged by injustice, who is outraged by inequality, who's outraged by bigotry, who's outraged by, wrongdoing and corruption, who will actually step up and want to do these things. And I wish there are more and more because society is only fixed, changed by constantly combating and questioning its bad habits and bad practices, right? Which is what journalists need to do.
So,
Uh,
in a sense, these young rebellious people are questioning a lot of stuff. But is there a difference between rebellion and responsibility for individuals who pursue this?
I think I wouldn't, when you're young, I wouldn't put the burden of too much responsibility on the young, given that the old are so irresponsible. I mean, the problem in the world is not that the young are irresponsible. The problem in the world is the old who are irresponsible. I mean, I often, when I used to go to colleges to speak earlier, I used to always tell people that you must respect your teachers and you must respect your parents, but don't always listen to them because they are not necessarily right. If they were right, the world would not be in such a shambolic place. The world is in a shambolic place because the olders have been failing again and again. So to the young, actually, I say the responsibility really is to the truth of your story. The responsibility is to getting the facts right. The responsibility is to not letting prejudice and whimsicality derail the truth of the work you're doing. There is a genuine commitment to facts, truth, balance. These are all extremely important things for a young journalist to learn and to be fair at all times. But the responsibility of what they reveal then lies with the rest of society. I mean, they don't run society. A reporter, what is the best thing a good reporter, or journalist can do? He can bring out the truth. After that, it's the job of the judiciary, it's the job of the executive, it's the job of leaders of elders of society to act upon it. I mean, the journalist is neither policeman nor judge nor politician. He's just a reporter. He's just bringing out the truth.
Moving away from journalism, power in general changes people, It changes their mind, it magnifies character, good and bad. If you could speak to every 25-year-old who dreams of influence, would you caution them about something of how to handle it when it comes to them?
For sure. I would advocate 1 to 10 humility. I mean, there is no question about it. And I've said this to my reporters all the years that I worked. I said, just because you have Shah Rukh Khan's phone number with you, just because you have Amit Shah's phone number on your mobile phone, just because you have Mukesh Ambani's phone number on your mobile phone, doesn't mean you're any of those things. You are just, remember, you're just a observer, you're an analyzer, you're a reporter. That's your job. Having proximity to glamour, having proximity to money, having proximity to power does not make you any of that. If you seek that, then you must do other things. What you are here is actually as a reporter. You're here to report on all of these people with all the fairness, acuity, factuality, intelligence that you carry. Do not go fall into a delusion of mixing these things up. And this is what I would say to any reporter. If it doesn't excite you to be a reporter, a writer. If what excites you is to be Shah Rukh Khan, then go and be a film star. If it excites you to be Amit Shah, be a politician. Mukesh Ambani, be a businessman. So anytime you're doing, you have to have a very great clarity upon who you are and what your role is. And your role at all times is to be the observer, the analyzer, and the teller of the story. That's who you are.
So humility is that number one thing that you would want them to continue to maintain. I want to explore a little bit about your writing. Your fiction always explores obsession, desire, moral ambiguity. Why is it that we are drawn to flawed characters? I mean, there seems to be a natural attraction to flawed characters.
Because that's the job. Actually, interestingly, Nalin, when I look at the two vocations I pursued, one is journalism and the other is literature. I see both vocations as fundamentally subversive vocations. I see that the raison d'etre for both vocations is fundamentally to act as subversive agents, as agents that stir the status quo, they challenge the status quo. Now, what happens is that when you read literary classics of another time, this they may not seem like that, but for that time, every great literary book was somewhere challenging the status quo of its time, right? And that's the point of great writing. The point of great writing is, and I was once asked this question in Paris in Fanac, where somebody stood up, my second novel, The Story of My Assassins, which became the became the which later became a very famous television series called Patal Lok. When I was reading that in France, somebody stood up from the audience and said, "Mr. Tejpal, I mean, your book really keeps me awake at night. I find it so disturbing and terrifying." And my response was, "I'm delighted because that's exactly what I wish from my readers. I'm not here to comfort my readers. I'm not here to make my entertain my readers. I'm here to stick a knife into your side and make you think. I'm here to make discomfort you for the easy, verities that you inhabit. And so in all my books, my attempt really is to challenge the status quo. And when you talk about flawed characters, the fact of the matter is that we are all flawed people. The flawed character is the centerpiece of all literature in the world. What is Hamlet? What is Macbeth? What is Julius Caesar? Or I mean, I can go on and on. What is
Actually,
what? Yeah,
even
sorry.
your later books, the characters are fundamentally conflicted, not just flawed, right? They are conflicted from various sides. There's no good, bad. You're not trying to pass judgment. You're not trying to create heroes. They're fundamentally conflicted.
Because the idea, see, it's the job of religion to provide comfort. It's not the job of literature. It's the job of literature to actually provide discomfort. I mean, the literary novel is actually the great secular book of religion, where I'm concerned. In the chaos and noise of the modern world, it's the one artifact that can connect you back to your inner life. We've lost our inner lives in all the noise, right? We live in an age of amusement. This is the great age of distractions and amusement. If you want amusement, you have 1,000 options, boss.
So,
OTTs,
just,
movies. It's not the job of serious writing to provide you amusement.
so just on that, today's young adults are navigating things like dating, ambition, and identity in a hyper digital world. What does literature teach us that social media cannot?
I mean, the more serious underlying stuff. First of all, it ought to teach you the transitory nature of the world. It ought to teach you that humans over the millennia have fundamentally wrestled with the same dilemmas. There is nothing dramatically new that is happening to you. I mean, it has happened to over 2,000 years ago, and it happened to Kalidasa 1,600 years ago, and you can go all the way back to the Iliad and the Odyssey and the Mahabharata and Ramayana 3,000 years ago. And why do we read the Mahabharata and are still dazzled by it? Because its moral concerns, its ethical concerns are all the same. So there is something that literature teaches you again and again, that you got to get perspective. For me, the biggest thing literature gives you is perspective, which even journalism doesn't give you, because journalism is history in a hurry. But literature gives you that perspective between the outer life and the inner life, the nature of existence, the nature of the unknowability of existence, the flawed nature of human beings, and for me, the single largest thing, empathy. I think I was talking to Purushottam Agarwal some months ago, and I was telling him one of the reasons we are seeing so much bigotry in the world, so much hate, so much polarity, is because less and less people read literature. What literature? So when I read, let's say I read Crime and Punishment, Fyodor Dostoevsky, or The Brothers Karamazov, or read Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy, or Madame Bovary by Flaubert. I'm entering another life. I'm entering another skin. I'm entering another world. I'm entering another set of values and concerns. In doing that, I begin to understand the extremely plural and variegated nature of existence. I'm no longer there to be seduced by simplistic, stupid ideas. I'm no longer here to be seduced to say, Chinese लोग बड़े खराब हैं या oh German बड़े खराब हैं ये we realize that actually around the world humans actually deal with the same impulses, the same psychoses, the same fears, the same acts of greed and generosity. And that in itself breeds tolerance. It breeds a liberal state of mind. And literature, so for me, the single biggest thing it actually serves is empathy. And for me, empathy lies at the heart of the future of humankind. If we are to have a future.
So, just on your characters, they all seem to have emotional complexity as part of their growth in your books. So, d- is suffering necessary for depth,
I think
emotional?
it is. I'm really sorry to say to the young, but yes, I think good times teach us very little. Suffering teaches us a lot. And suffering is endemic to the human condition. We must understand that. And I think grace and beauty lies in those who can endure suffering without losing their decencies, without losing their true values. But suffering, there's the famous thing my mother used to always say, Nanak Dukhiya Sab Sansar. Which is a thing that, Nanak himself wrote that "Kids, this is a world, it's a vale of tears. And we all know that. We know we will lose our parents. We know we will lose our siblings. We know we will lose our children one day. We know everyone we love will go away. We will go away. I'm saying there is no, we know we will suffer disease. We know we will suffer deprivations. Even the richest person is not immune to all that. In that case, suffering is actually a theme song for every single individual in this world. Yeah. The differentiator is, how do you endure it? Do you
Yeah.
endure it with grace, with beauty, with song, with courage? I think that's what differentiates you. And to the young, that's all I would say. Don't imagine you will not suffer. S- Teach yourself how to have deep grace and beauty in all suffering. Yeah.
So I'll take that point a little further, because in this hyper spotlight world on social media, when people falter, there is a lot of scrutiny, there's a lot of comment, etc. How should people deal with that, and how can people separate self-worth from public opinion?
So, where I'm concerned, I have a very, very deep-rooted belief which I've lived with every day of my life, which is actually, it's actually the burden, in some sense, of the Gita in the Mahabharata, which is detached action. That's the great lesson of the Gita. We know that, where when Arjuna says, "I can't do this," because I'm not going to go around killing my uncles and my cousins, and Krishna's this thing to him is detached action. Now, this detached action, and now I'll take it in a secular way. So I'll treat the Mahabharata not as a religious text, but as a literary literature text. You know, it is a great tactic, a great strategy for ensuring that you can live your life without being discombobulated by anybody who crosses your path. And in social media, it's a true problem, because if you're going to be derailed by everybody who says something nasty to you, you can have no life, right? So you have to have a deep degree of detachment, even as you go about doing things. Yeah, retain the ability to act at all times, but also retain the ability to stay detached from it, from all things. So you can love and work with great passion and loyalty, but remain detached enough that were you to lose all of it, you would still be in some way a balanced human. Yeah.
Yeah. So just circling back to your writing, uh, to, one of your books is almost is an incident that happened with you, which became Patal Lok, etc. But your other books are pure fiction. How much do your personal experiences come into it? I mean, how do you write personally? Because I meet a lot of writers. So some produce a lot of work every day, some do it in a disciplined manner, some lock themselves for a few months, some experience things, travel, and then do it. What has shaped you? What shapes your writing? What influences your writing?
So, the first thing is I write very, very little, because I think there's enough garbage in the world without me needing to add to it. So I only write when the book is beating inside my head and I can't escape it. When the material has fermented, matured, is ready to be poured out, and I have no option but to just sit down and start work. So all the books I've written have been written in exactly that, when the words are drumming inside my head. It takes me about 2.5 years to finish a book, but once I start, normally the title comes to me. Then I wait for the first line. Then one day the first line comes to me, and by this time, maybe a couple of years of maturing, it has already gone on in my head, and then I begin to write. But once I start to write, then I write with the monumental discipline. I mean, I write in one unbroken way till the book is over, and I write in a very finished way. When I don't write multiple drafts. Once I'm done, I'm done. I just have to do a tight edit. That's it. Because of my extremely busy, contested, and for a long time public life, I could not have the luxury of either uh, deciding on what time I will work or where I will work. I could have no, and that was the first important thing that freed me up to write. That there will be no perfect moment to do the writing. So this is my advice to all those who wish to write. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Just do the writing wherever it's possible. I wrote my books, Nalin, on planes, on trains, in waiting rooms, in hotel rooms, because I was in the middle of the Helka battles all the time, legal battles, court battles, public battles. But once I started, I had my laptop and I would write. I had a very iron discipline about how much work I would do every week. So I used to set a certain quota of work for every week because I couldn't do it by the day because of my chaotic life. But then I would make sure, no matter what, that I got that amount of work in. So that discipline you need.
Yeah, I understand that, and it resonates with me because in my head, the idea ferments for years,
Yeah,
and the structure and how I will present it ferments for a long time. The actual writing doesn't take time; it just
yeah,
comes out.
yeah.
One shot. So, that
For,
resonates.
for, 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 for me, it's actually finding the voice. I mean, the most difficult thing about every piece of literature is the voice. I mean, there's a particular voice that can tell the story you want to tell perfectly. For example, the story My Assassin, which actually is not based on my life. Only the trigger point is. The trigger point was that there was an assassination attempt on my life in the year 2001, where the Delhi police arrested five killers who had taken a supari to kill me. Uh, and I only saw them once when I was called to the Patiala House courts to identify them. And basically, the magistrate asked me, have you ever seen any of these five boys?" And I said, "No, I had not." But when I went into the courtroom and I looked at these five boys roped together, standing there, something began to click in my head. And I kept thinking, who are these boys? Why would they take a supari for a few lakh rupees to kill somebody they know nothing about, whom they don't know? And I began to think of what their life trajectories could be. So that was the only trigger point. So, in fact, soon after I came back from the court, I remember just lying on my bed and the title came to me, The Story of My Assassins, right? And after that, it took me another 3 years before I began to write it. So for 3 years, it fermented in my head. All the while, I was thinking about these five boys, and I still remember the boy who became Hathoda Tyagi in the book was a little distinct from the other four because of his size, built, and the way he looked at me. With that dead, cold, steely eyes. And so he, in fact, became. But everything was imagined in the book. I mean, but you asked me something earlier. Where does the material come from? The material always comes from life. I mean, the material of all writing has to come from life. I mean, life lived, seen, heard, experienced. Imagined. But I mean, that's where the material. So first of all, to those youngsters who are listening to this, my advice to those who want to write more seriously is first live, then write. Because the writing has to come from the living. So, first act is of living, and the second then is of writing. So, don't be in a hurry to just start writing, be in a hurry to start living.
And so that would probably include a lot of travel, meeting people from outside your social group,
Everything. I
all
mean,
strata of
yeah.
society.
From life, you have to live intensely to find the material. Sometimes intense living is not even moving outside and living outside. It might be an incredible interiority. You might have a deeply interior life, and you're very deeply engaged with the interior life, and that itself could provide you the material for your work. I
If
like
there,
say Franz Kafka. Deep interiority.
true. If there is one among all the wonderful things we have spoken about, if there is one uncomfortable truth young people need to hear today, which they are not hearing, what would that be?
That, in my opinion, very clearly is that never build your life with the certitude that you will get what you wish to get and what you even deserve to get, right? Life is very uneven, and that's okay. That's okay. All you can do is strive for what you believe in. Strive to do the things that you wish to do. Because at the end of the day, even if you don't get this phony imagined reward, you will have the profound satisfaction of having lived your days exactly as you wish to. And that's its own reward. So don't wait for this big laddu at the end of your life. There is no big laddu at the end of your life. It's every day living your life exactly as you'd like to. So that when your time is run, you will always have that satisfaction, even if you get nothing else, that I actually lived my life by my own values and by my own rules. Yeah.
So, in this last segment, six rapid fire questions.
Sure.
Uh, what would you choose, truth or power?
Truth,
What would you choose, fame or freedom?
freedom,
Legacy or peace?
legacy.
What is that one book every young adult must read as per you? One book.
Oh, Animal Farm,
Okay.
George Orwell.
One habit young people must develop.
Reading,
I
serious
know.
reading.
It's gone out of fashion. Nobody
Yeah,
reads
serious reading. I mean,
books.
I read about 70 to 100 books a year, and I can tell you it's the most important thing for me even now.
Absolutely. And lastly, one belief which you had when you were young that you've changed your mind about as you grew older.
The significance of fame. It is highly overrated.
Perfect. Tarun, I cannot thank you enough for this very insightful and lively conversation. Your energy, even now, is contagious. And I would love to, put you in front of young adults at some point of time in person and have a great chat with you as a fireside chat. Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Nalin.
Thank you for
Thank
your
you,
time.
Nalin. Thank you. And all the very best with everything. Thank you.